Welcome back. All right, so since this is the second week of the power rankings, second week anyways during the regular season, some big movers. Big movers. This happens. That being said, from 32 through one, we ready? I'm so anxious for the internet to get mad at me. Now, I don't think Sharks fans are going to be mad that they're 32nd on the board. I think this is to be expected. What a huge difference Celebrini makes. Without him in the lineup, it takes the wind out of their sails. It is not dissimilar from when Bedard's been out for Chicago. It is not dissimilar to how Minnesota looks when Kaprizov's not on the ice. That's how much of a difference maker that Celebrini could very well be. We'll see when he returns. He could return very soon, and maybe that drags San Jose out of last place on the board. But they're there again this week. They haven't been out of last place yet in power rankings, so let's go. Number 31 dropping 5 spots from last week, Philly. Rough home debut for them tonight. They've had a rough go of it, and I don't remember them starting this way last season. I seem to remember them sticking around the playoff picture throughout most of the year. Now, obviously, it's still very early in the season, but it is less encouraging for Philadelphia than I think people might have hoped when Michkov was signed. And I don't think that it's... Now, a lot of people are going to blame the goaltending. I don't think it's just on the goaltending. I don't think the team's quite at the level where we can expect them to stay in contention for the playoffs. Last year may just have been an aberration. Number 30, dropping 2 spots from last week, Chicago. So the Chicago Blackhawks losing tonight against Buffalo, that forced them down. Chicago's competitive in almost every game they've played. They're not getting blown out like last year, for instance. And now that could change as the season rolls on, and it especially can change when the record starts getting ugly. But at this point, I think Chicago's doing about as well as one might expect this season, and we'll see what the rest of this season holds. Number 29, moving up 1 spot from last week, Buffalo. The Buffalo Sabres, they now have 2 wins this season, one over the Florida Panthers and one over Chicago. And the less said about all the other games they've played, the better, I guess. But for Buffalo, the win tonight does move them past Chicago. And can they get on a run? I'm not betting on it because, for years now, I've been like, let's go. Come on, Buffalo, let's go. I can't imagine how it is for Sabres fans. Because at this point, I kind of don't want to get my hopes up that Buffalo's going to go on some sort of a run. And yet, I want them. I really want them to. I want to see the Sabres in the playoffs. Anyways, that being said, we're moving on to number 28. Moving up 3 spots from last week, Anaheim. The Ducks, Dostal steals them that point against Colorado, but they get that point against Colorado. And they've got a decent record through their first few games, so they move up to 28th. Not a crazy move up for Anaheim. I do not anticipate crazy moves up the board for Anaheim this season, but number 28 is definitely better than 30, and it's better than 31 where they started, so I guess at this rate, eventually they're going to be top 10 by the end of the year, maybe if they just keep plugging away. Couple spots here, couple spots there. I don't think it's going to happen, but you never know. Stranger things have happened. Number 27, same spot as last week for Columbus. The Columbus Blue Jackets. They lost both games against Minnesota, so they're done with Minnesota for this year. The Columbus Blue Jackets, we know the challenges this team has. And we knew this before the season got started, so this is really just kind of a year where it feels like they're playing with house money. So, as in, I don't think there's any pressure in Columbus at all on this season because of the circumstances surrounding the team. Number 26, and the biggest drop easily of the season, down 12 spots, Nashville. Nashville at 0-5. It's just not there. They had a lot of shots today on Detroit. I don't know how many of them were dangerous. I haven't looked that information up yet. But I never got the feeling that they were going to win that game. And it's insane that we're this early in the season and I'm already feeling that way with Nashville. Now, yes, Nashville can turn this around. But now they've dug themselves into an 0-5 hole, while other teams in the West are building up points. So you're putting yourself in a position not just where your record's not very good, but now you've got to really go on quite the run to get caught up, and they cannot afford to keep losing like this. So with Nashville, Things have to turn around soon, or we're going to be having whole different conversations about the Nashville Predators. Do not be surprised when I make a video on them either tomorrow or Monday. Number 25, and dropping into the bottom row with a drop of 4 spots, is Detroit. They started the season 15th. I was optimistic. That optimism, well, they're already done with Nashville, and that's the only team they've beaten. So, if they had more games against Nashville, maybe, but they don't. So, yeah. Detroit, it feels like, I don't know, things just aren't quite in sync. Things just aren't quite working for them. And I don't know where to look. I don't know which person to point the finger at necessarily. I'm sure the internet has various candidates. But, yeah, the Wings were supposed to be better than this, and they're not. Something's going to have to happen soon. Number 24, moving up 5 spots from last week. I knew the Islanders weren't staying in the bottom row. There's no way the Islanders are staying in the bottom row, and they didn't. So the Islanders move out of the bottom row. They're 24th on the board, and I would not be surprised to see them move up further this coming week. The Islanders showed some fight back against a very game Montreal team. Montreal is absolutely capable of securing some upset victories here and there. So for the Islanders, they needed the win tonight. They got it via the shootout. It took 9 rounds, but they got it. Number 23, dropping 8 spots from last week, Colorado. Now, there are going to be people asking why Colorado isn't in the bottom row. Colorado's not in the bottom row because I don't think they're playing that badly. The results are the reason that they're dropping, but they're not dropping further because I don't think the team is built wrong. I don't think this is something that they're not going to dig their way out of. So, unlike Nashville, I'm not as concerned with Colorado as I am with Nashville. Obviously, Colorado's dealing with a lot of injuries as well, and the suspension to Nichushkin and everything else that's gone on. So at some point in time, they should get players back in the lineup like Drouin, Taves, Nichushkin. Landeskog is trending towards a return. We just don't have the date yet. I think Colorado's going to be fine. It's just been a rough start for them. Number 22, moving up 2 spots from last week, Seattle. They have a good record. They do. And that's why they move up this week. Seattle has a good record. I'm still not entirely sold on the team as is. And so it is a modest jump for them this week. In the event that they have a really good week this coming week, you will see a much bigger jump from Seattle. So they do move up a couple of spots. They move back. Well, actually, no, they're above where they were to start the season. I started them in 24th. Now they're 22nd. So they have moved up. Not as much as some might want them to, but they have moved up. Number 21, moving up 1 spot from last week, Montreal. The Habs are below 500, but they're in every game. They're playing pretty well. I would say that a lot of the young guys look pretty good, and if they can maintain this, if they can avoid that wall that rookie players usually hit by around game 50, they can avoid that rookie wall that a lot of young guys end up hitting. This could be a fun season for Montreal fans. Even if they don't make the playoffs, this could be a fun season for them because this team could stay in a bunch of games and, maybe play spoiler as well, right? At number 20, moving up 5 spots from last week. I've zoomed the camera in, so I have to remember where I am on this. But yeah, Minnesota. So the Minnesota Wild move up 5 spots from last week and sit 20th on the board. They're sitting 3-0-2, but 2 of those wins are over Columbus. So they're 1-0-2 when they don't play Columbus. I'm kind of hoping to see more from them when they're not playing. I mean, they haven't lost in regulation yet, so that's an accomplishment. Thus, they move up to 20th. But now that they're done with Columbus for the year, we can see how they do against everybody else. Number 19, moving up 1 spot from last week, Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Penguins hanging around and may very well be a team to watch as the season rolls along in the East for various reasons beyond just the milestones that guys like Crosby and Malkin are just going to obliterate as they go along here. But Pittsburgh, keep an eye on them as Nedeljkovic is back with the team. And now they won't have to go to Jari. They could keep Blomqvist up. They could play Nedeljkovic. Do you waive Jari? Nobody's taking Jari if they waive him, but do they do that? Let me know your thoughts. Because crazier things have happened. All right, so Pittsburgh number 19. Who's number 18? Number 18 on the board this week, dropping 6 spots from last week. The LA Kings. The Kings, rough road trip by the end of it. Although I think they're still on the road. Tuesday, I think they're in Anaheim. So, yeah, they're not done with playing on the road yet. And maybe they're more tired. I don't know what the case is, but for the LA Kings, a bit of a drop from last week. They're outside of the top 16. I would not be surprised to see them jump back up. They just have to rediscover that defensive identity. And they didn't quite have that going for them this past week. Number 17, dropping 4 spots from last week, but they've moved up over the last few days here. So the Edmonton Oilers dropped to 17. They drop out of the top half, but I know they're going to be in the top half next week. I feel like the Oilers are getting it together. They had a good game against Dallas until they didn't. So Dallas in the second half of the game, they woke up and they got things going. And Edmonton, I don't know if it was a lack of adjustment or just, Dallas is a very good team, but Edmonton loses that game by a score of 4-1. So the Oilers end up at 17th, but earlier in the week I had them as low as 20th. So they have moved back up. I do still update these nightly. As I've said many times over, the power rankings, I update them every day. So with each game that is played by a team, I go, okay, are they in the right spot? Do they need to move up? Do they need to move down? And this is why I don't have to do like major changes on Saturday night. I don't stress about it because I know I've updated it every day. I did try doing where I would update it once a week, and it was too much stress and too much, okay, this team can't, but this team, and then this, and then that. So daily works a lot better for me personally. Number 16, moving up 3 spots from last week, St. Louis Blues. The Blues, and I don't know that I've used this puck in a long time either when it comes to the puck board. And somebody asked too last week where I got the puck board. It was custom made for me. Somebody made it for me, and I sent them money for it, for making it. They didn't even ask me a price, and I gave them what they felt was a fair price for it. I'm really glad I have this board, and it's lasted me for years. Anyways, St. Louis moves up to number 16, and they were pretty impressive tonight against Carolina. What I liked with that game against Carolina, every time it looked like the Canes had things rolling, St. Louis adjusted, and they fixed what was going awry for them. There was no panic with the Blues, and that's a big thing. The Blues could be a surprise team this year in the NHL. Number 15, moving up 8 spots from last week, Calgary. Calgary's 4-0-1, and I don't know how long this is going to go on, but the funny thing is, I've already started hearing, well, it's a mirage. Calgary's not going to be there. Well, Calgary doesn't really want to make the playoffs, so they're not going to be there. Do you know what it sounds like to me? It sounds like to me 2 years ago, the start Seattle had, where people were like, well, they can't keep this up. And I kept saying, why can't they? So in the case of the Calgary Flames, they don't have any business being above the playoff line, but they're there. And I feel like this is a team that could, since there's absolutely no pressure, be a heck of a lot better than anybody thought they would be. And tonight, Vladar looked quite good. Wolf's been really good. If they get the goaltending, and if the young guys keep playing like they've been playing, I'm just saying they're going to stay in this race a lot longer than people think they will. Number 14, moving up 2 spots from last week, Ottawa. So Ottawa getting a win or two when you don't have Linus Ullmark, who is easily their best goaltender, that's a win. And so the Ottawa Senators right now are kind of putting this together, and maybe the Ottawa Senators are going to end up surprising everybody and end up finishing above the playoff line. At the very least, they're 14th on the board this week. We'll see where they are next week, but yeah, they're 14th right now. Number 13, moving up 5 spots from last week. 5. I got to make sure. Camera's normally over here. Now I'm in here. Vancouver. The Vancouver Canucks move up to 13. The loss against Tampa, I'm not going to penalize them for the loss against Tampa. Tampa's a really good team in the East. The win against Florida, they played really, really well. They controlled Florida in that game. Yes, Florida's without Barkov and Tkachuk, but still. And then tonight in Philadelphia, they just didn't give Philadelphia any daylight, really. And when Philadelphia had daylight, Lankinen took care of it. So right now, the Vancouver Canucks, I think, are doing pretty well after a slow start. And if they can bring that game home with them, be all right. Keep in mind that East Coast swing is what I usually watch for with the Canucks because it has sunk their seasons. But last year, as I remember it, the East Coast swing was fine, and they end up making the playoffs. So I'm far more optimistic about Vancouver now than I was 7 days ago. Number 12, dropping 2 spots from last week, Boston. There's just something with Boston right now that for me isn't quite clicking. And it's not just in games against Florida. I just don't feel like Boston at this point in time, that there's just something there that they don't feel quite like a contender, and we'll see if that changes over the next couple of weeks. But that's what I've been feeling. That game against Utah tonight, I felt like Utah outplayed them. I thought Utah outplayed them. Utah was quite good tonight, and there were certain stretches of the game where Boston just wasn't able to generate very much. And I'm concerned about their attack as the season rolls on, because if Pasternak's controlled and if he's not able to get those goals, where are they going to come from for Boston? And that's a question I've been asking myself into last season, really. Number 11, and dropping 4 spots from last week, Carolina's out of the top row. The Canes, I'm not dropping them much further. They've only played 4 games. They're 2-2. I don't want to overreact. Which I know seems weird in a video where a team drops by 12 and the Capitals still are not on the board, and right now Caps fans are like, I think he forgot us. So Carolina drops. I don't think they're playing great, but tonight they played well against St. Louis, and Hofer kind of stole that, and Kochetkov, they weren't quite getting the saves there when they needed them. I don't know which of those goals he was supposed to stop anyways, but I'm just throwing that out there. 4 goals on 19 shots. It's going to have people asking some questions. Freddie Anderson's looked pretty good early in the season, though. I still think Carolina's going to be, top 2, top 3 in their division by season's end. Number 10, moving up 1 spot from last week, the Utah Hockey Club. Utah has put together a pretty strong start to the season, and tonight they played their second ever game in Utah at home, and they won. They've won both games in Utah, so good for them. And I like their attack. I like their team. I think they have a very good team. In fact, during the game against Boston, I was kind of mumbling that, Utah's a pretty good team. They've got a pretty strong roster. It's a young roster, but it's a pretty good one. And if they can keep going like this, that could be a lot of fun. If Utah makes the playoffs in their first year, I'm all for that. I would be sad on some level that it wasn't Arizona, that the Coyotes didn't get that, and that their fans didn't get to see it, but you know what? I'm not going to say anything bad with Utah. I think this could be a great story, too. We'll see how it goes. Number 9, same spot as last week, New Jersey. So with New Jersey, I didn't see anything from them that causes them to move down or move up. So they're still in the top 10. I still think New Jersey's a playoff team. I don't know if they're a contender or not. I didn't take them to win the Stanley Cup, so that jinx is gone for them. But for New Jersey, I do think that that's probably about the right spot for them at this point. 9th place on the board. I'm not moving them up, moving them down at this stage. Which brings us into the top row. Are you excited for the top row? I hope so. I'm sure the internet's going to have its opinions about the rest of the board to this point, but let's charge into the top row anyways. Same spot as last week for Toronto. The Toronto Maple Leafs stay at 8th. Again, I feel like, Toronto, New Jersey, they're right in about the right spot. When Toronto, New Jersey played against each other, Toronto won that game. I'm fine with it. Toronto's 8th. They do lose the game tonight, but they lost against a team that's towards the top of the board, so I'm not going to penalize them for that. And that's a change from how I used to do. In the beginning when I did the power rankings, it didn't matter who beat you or who you beat. I moved you up or moved you down. That was chaos. So I learned pretty quickly not to do things that way. But yeah, Toronto, I still think a top row team. I know there'll be some discussion on that. I'm fine with that. I understand the detractors for Toronto. I think they're a pretty good team. Not in that top 5 category, but not that far off. Number 7, moving up 10 spots from last week, Capitals. The Capitals have been really impressive. And what I kept thinking this week is, people were upset they made the playoffs last year, and there was lots of talk, especially after they got swept by the Rangers in the first round, that these guys are bums, they shouldn't have been there at all. I'm sure the Caps heard some of that. And I'm sure that, players will always say they don't hear what's reported in media and they don't hear what the fans say. But I'm sure there's a few of them that heard that. And I'm sure management might have caught wind of some of that too. I think they went out in the offseason. They did a good job of improving their roster, and Washington looks dangerous. They have some really good offensive players, and I think it looks like they're going to make the playoffs again. So, yeah, Washington moves up the board a lot. Number 6, same spot as last week for the Vegas Golden Knights. They were all ready to jump into the top 5, and then they lost the game against Tampa in that final minute. They lose tonight against Florida in overtime. It's not horrible to lose against Florida. Florida's not shown up on the board yet. So Vegas losing against Florida is not the end of the world, nor is them losing against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now we just watch what happens when Vegas is playing against other teams that they should beat, that we can look at and say, well, that's a team that on paper Vegas should be better than. And we'll see if they're able to turn the losing around over the next little while here. But yeah, Vegas, number 6 this week, same as last week. Number 5, dropping one spot from last week, Florida. The Panthers, defending Stanley Cup champions, dropped the one spot. They still get the point against Vancouver. Then they get the 2 points tonight against Vegas. They're finding ways to get points without Barkov and without Tkachuk. I can't really drop them much further than 5th as a result of that. If the record stays mediocre when you get Tkachuk back and then you get Barkov back, then I'll definitely consider moving them down. But at this point, I still feel like they're a top 5 team in the National Hockey League. Number 4, moving up one spot from last week, the Lightning. Tampa Bay moves up to number 4, so both Florida teams are in the top 5. And with Tampa Bay, we'll find out on Monday where Tampa Bay's at too, because Tampa Bay's in Toronto, and then of course Tuesday all 32 teams are playing, so that'll be the first half of back-to-backs for Tampa and Toronto. It'll be a nice test for 2 teams in the top row. But the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think, are playing really well, and Jake Gensel looks pretty darn good, and Vasilevsky, shaky a little bit here and there, but I think he's had a better start this year than last year, because last year he was injured. So this year he's at least playing, and he can play through whatever, iffy games he has here and there. But yeah, Tampa Bay, top 4, despite the loss against Ottawa. I did bump Ottawa up for that win. I did not bump Tampa Bay down for that loss. Number 3, moving down 2 spots from last week, Dallas Stars. Dallas drops to number 3. So they were number 1 last week, and of course the jinx, because I saw that last week. Oh, now Dallas is jinxed. Not really. I mean, they've only got 1 loss on the season. I think they're all right. It's just a matter of, I think there's 2 teams right now that I could not deny needed to be above Dallas. The game today against Edmonton, they played a little bit of rope-a-dope there, where they waited before they got things rolling in that second half of the game, but it still worked out for them. They still got the win, and yeah, Dallas ends up 3rd this week on the board. Number 2, same spot as last week, New York Rangers. The New York Rangers, number 2 for a second straight week. They started the season 4th. Yeah, they started the season 4th. Now they're up to number 2. And yeah, for the New York Rangers, it has been a really strong start to the season. That game against Toronto, I never really got the feeling that Toronto was going to come back and win that. I felt like the Rangers, once it was 2-0, I was like, all right, so Shesterkin's not allowing 3 tonight. This game's probably done. And it was. Shesterkin, an absolutely amazing game. It's interesting, too, with all the goalies being signed, a lot of announcers from around the NHL weighing in on the goaltending contracts being signed. And it seems like most of the color announcers that are talking about it say the same thing. The Rangers need to get Shesterkin signed, and it doesn't matter how much it takes to sign him because he's the best goalie in the league. So that seems to be the thinking around the NHL, and we'll see whether or not the Rangers do get him signed soon because, yeah, they're right near the top. Which brings us to number 1. And moving up 2 spots from last week, it's the Jets, the Winnipeg Jets, number 1 on the board. And tomorrow they're playing at home against Pittsburgh. During that game in the first period, we'll be doing the Zoom call with members and patrons. So that should be fun. And then, yeah, I'll look to get a live stream going this week on the channel, I think, as well. There's 2 relatively quiet nights, so I'll be able to do that for the channel. But yeah, the Winnipeg Jets, number 1, and tomorrow afternoon I'll see how they do against Pittsburgh. So it's a good, I think Pittsburgh's a good test for Winnipeg too. I think that matchup should challenge them well enough, but it's a game that, yes, Winnipeg being at home should win, but we'll find out tomorrow what happens. And for tonight, that's where everybody sits on the board. So again, by the time Sunday night's rolled around, the board's changed. Not, I don't leave the puck. The puck board I only use on Saturday, but my usual power rankings board, the same one I used 5 years ago, it sits in the corner of my room, and I move the logos around every night. So by Sunday night, when people are like, "These power rankings are dumb," I'm like, "You're right. They don't. They're not. They don't reflect my power rankings at all. What was I thinking?" And then by Tuesday night, this could be chaos. So this upcoming week should be busy, but it should be fun as well. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you've not done so already. But yeah, thank you guys for all your support. And for all of those who subscribed, new and subscribed a long time ago, you were all appreciated. And I will talk to you again soon.